Hi everybody, it's Misty Waterfalls and welcome to my channel. Today, I thought it would be fun to do a DIY Sew Along With Me tutorial on making a wrap t-shirt. I've actually never made one before, so it's going to be an experiment for all of us, and I hope it turns out well, so stick around to the end to see the final result. I've been sewing for I think about maybe 3 to 4 years now. I started just hand sewing cushions for the holiday season and got really into it, so I decided to buy myself a sewing machine, and I've been working on that ever since. I'm completely self-taught, so I don't have real technical information, but as Tim Gunn would say, I can make it work. I really enjoy making my costumes for drag. I've been sewing longer than I have been doing drag, and I think it is another way to show my creativity. Alright, so let's get started. So for today's project, I'm using some scrap suede, faux suede stretch fabric. It stretches only in one direction, and that's going to be the direction that wraps around my body. I prefer this kind of fabric just because I don't need to create darts on non-stretch fabric to create a better fitting. Here's a bodice pattern that I made. The link is down below. It's quite simple. I suggest you do the same. And I'm just going to trace that around um, the fabric. So I'm using a Sharpie. I don't suggest it. It's just it was easier to show up on camera. And also when you're tracing your pattern, if you didn't account for the seam allowance, make sure to add that now. I didn't trace down the center. What I did was from the shoulder down the neckline, as soon as I got to the center, I just continued the line diagonally. This is to create a V-neck and give more of the wrap around from the front. Here I just folded the fabric over, struggled a bit trying to get it smoothed out, and this is to create two identical symmetrical pieces. This is going to give a better finish in the end. When I cut the fabric, because I used the Sharpie, I made sure to cut on the inside of the line so that it wouldn't be shown. Um, Let me know if you can figure out at what point I messed this up later on, and I am now stuck with a Sharpie stain on my top, unfortunately. So I cut those two pieces out, and as you can see, I have two identical pieces that will wrap around and fold over each other. So at this point, I hadn't decided exactly how deep I want the V on the V-neck. Uh, I just left it like this for now, and I'm not going to be hemming it. It's not a fabric that frays, so it won't be seen. For the back panel, what I do is I trace again the same pattern piece and I cut it on a fold. This way I end up with one identical symmetrical piece, as you can see here. Now I'm just laying out my pieces. I'm putting the front pieces on top of the back piece and lining up the shoulders. This is going to give a bit of an idea of how it's going to look in the end, and we're going to be sewing up along these shoulders first. And whenever you sew, make sure you're always sewing right sides together. What that means is the side you want facing outwards should be together so that all your seams will be on the inside and all the parts you want to be shown will be on the outside. Now that those two pieces are together, we're going to go along with the sleeves. This isn't the technique I would normally do, but I tried it out for the first time here. So what you see here is my just standard sleeve pattern. They normally look like this. It's got kind of like a curve with an apex and then the two lines going down, taper because an arm gets smaller as it gets longer. And that's just a short sleeve pattern, a length that I personally like. But we're not doing that today. Instead, we're going through the curve that I created already. So we throw that away. We throw away the top we just made. Kidding, we're putting that aside for now. Just so I could lay out the fabric. Again, the stretch. This time I want to make sure the stretch goes around the armhole so that the armpit has a bit more movement and it's more comfortable. And I'm just going to trace out the curve that the pattern pieces created when they're together and extend that, tapering it based on my arm width uh, going down. Once that's drawn out, what I did was I folded the fabric in half so that I could have a symmetrical piece in the end. And also at the top, you'll see that the fabric is folded there as well. That way I can cut out two pieces at the same time. This way I get my two sleeves and they're both symmetrical. So once I had cut out everything, I realized that the sleeve was a bit longer at an awkward length than I wanted. It went right to my elbow, which I didn't really want. So instead, I just chopped that shorter than what I had drawn out. And you can see I have the two pieces there. And at this point, you would want to pin them together. So what you do is you find the center of the sleeve and pin it to the top of the shoulder, and then you go along all the way until you reach what's going to be the armpit. And I gave up on that because I hate pinning and I'm a lazy sewer. So what I do instead is I hold the fabric tightly as it passes through the machine, as you can see here, and I just readjust as I go along and make sure that it looks right. What I had done by mistake is when I drew my sleeve piece, it was a bit too short, so I had to stretch it as I went along just to make sure that it reached the armpit properly. And in the end, this worked out perfectly fine for me because um, I made sure that it fit. And I also sewed this with a zigzag stitch because it's stretch and I want to make sure that I give myself as much room and stretch as possible around the armpit so that it's comfortable for when I'm dancing around on stage. So once all that's sewn together, as you can see here, I'm folding it along the shoulder part and lining everything up just to give an idea of what it's going to look like. So this is what it should look like in the end. Again, the seams are what's facing us right now because we're sewing with the right sides together. And we're going to sew along the underarm of the sleeve and the side of the bodice. And this is going to finish up the top part, as you can see here. And this is how it folds over. And it's looking pretty great at this stage. So the last thing is to add a waistband. I prefer to have those, and it's also going to give us more place to tie because we're going to extend the waistband. So what I did was I took about 3 inches plus a 1/4 inch seam allowance of fabric and created a band that was 78 inches in length. This gave me just enough room to tie it in the back. So it wraps to the front and ties in the back. Just to give you an idea of measurements, my waist is 33 inches. The flap in the front went, including the back, the 2 flaps is 47 inches. And then the whole band is 78 inches. And that's what fits me pretty well. What I also did was at the end of the strap or the waistband, I kind of tapered it, as you can see here. That way it wasn't so bulky when it was tied into a knot. And here's the final look. You can't see that it is tied in the back. I didn't think it was necessary to show that, but you can see that it wraps around the bust pretty nicely and the waistband kind of cinches in. Ignore the black patch on my body form. I had stuffed it so that it's more my size, and then I just put a bodysuit over it to cover that. And I paired it with a skirt that was see-through, so I added another layer underneath later. You can ignore that for now. But this is the overall look. I think it came out really nicely. I didn't hem anything just because it's not a fabric that frays, so I didn't feel the need to, and it's not something that you're going to see on stage necessarily. And like I said, I'm pretty lazy when it comes to sewing. If you want to see what this looks like on, you can go to my Instagram, the link is below, or go to my previous video and watch the Blue Marina and the Diamonds music video as Mia Smurfette, where I wore this costume. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you have any questions or I wasn't clear enough, just ask them in the comments below and I'll be happy to answer. And if you do decide to recreate this top, please let me know and tag me in the post. I'd be so happy to see it. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in another video. Bye!